Kim said I should probably keep this to about 20 minutes. Hell, I can't say good morning in 20 minutes. I want to introduce my wife, Lori, over here, and my best friend. And she's really the best horseman in the family, if you want to know the truth. She has quite a horse operation up in Colorado, and I married into it, and we've continued it up there. I was saying to her the other day, I said, Lori, in your wildest dreams, did you ever think you'd marry a guy that won the Kentucky Derby 4 times? And she looked at me and said, Wayne, you're not in my wildest dreams. If you'll forgive this personal reference, I'm going to say I grew up in a small farm in Wisconsin. Actually, it was dairy and they raised potatoes around there and so forth. There was no horse activity whatsoever. And as kids, my father was kind enough to let me get a pony, and we would run those horses up and down the side roads and match them until they were sore and couldn't go anymore. And we just grew up like so many people that had a pony and then got interested in the thoroughbred business. And when you're in a small farming community like that, you are in a culture that is pretty tight. And I never really found out and got together with anybody that, dressed like these gentlemen here in the Jockey Club, people that, had master's degrees or education in a lot of ways. But I always thought that something was different. And I went to a one-room school from the 2nd to the 8th grade. And I was second. I was in my class. I was second. There were only 2 of us. Charlie Joyner was number 1. Number 2. But from all those years, I was in a class of 2. When I went, to high school, that was the first time that I was in a class of more than 2 kids. The teacher would call up, the 3rd grade, and there would be 3 or 4 of those, and then they'd go back to their seat, and she'd call up us and give us an assignment, and we'd go back to our seat, but that was it. And you can't make this up. But when I went to the university, I had an opportunity to get a job in a real high-end clothing store right on the Capitol Square at Madison, Wisconsin. And that clothing store drew people in from very much the professional community. The senators, the state senators, the lawyers, the doctors, all went in for fine clothes. And I noticed that there was a hell of a difference in those people and the people that I was associated with in that little community, that farming community in the middle of the state. And it impressed me a great deal. And I thought, these people are different. They walk different, they talk different, they act different. There's something here that I want to be and get to be like. And I thought one of the things that I found over the years is that you people that are being awarded something today for your service, for your longevity, somebody's watching. Somebody is using you as a role model. It might be in your family, it might be the neighbor kid or somebody, but it's surprising when you get to a certain status how many people are watching. And that role model atmosphere, don't underestimate it. You people have achieved something that is being recognized today. Lombardi, the great coach at Green Bay, said that the quality of a person's life is in direct proportion to his commitment to excellence, regardless of his field of endeavor. So now I'm going to share some thoughts with you. I look around the room. I've been 60, 65, 40, 30. None of you in here, I think, have been 83. So I'm going to go on the record of saying that maybe that experience factor is going to help me here. But there's a gap between where most people want to be, where they're at and where they'd like to be. But very few people have the desire to close that gap or work to prepare to cover it and bring it together so you can reach your goals. I found that in dealing with a lot of young trainers that have come through our program, that many of them have failed because they just don't have the desire to put in the time and effort. You people that are being honored here today have done that, and that's to be commendable. You gotta take the limits off it. But on doing that, don't create situations that make you a manager, a horse trainer, a coach. I think that what you do in life is you get that rifle approach and start looking at it, get right on target, and then do everything in your energies and every day to get there in every way possible. We have a comment here that we keep in our organizations called EE and I. Whenever things aren't going good, we say turn up the EE and I. Energy, enthusiasm, and intensity. Those are the things I constantly say to my young assistants. Turn up the EE and I. We got to get rolling here. And then the other thing is make the right choices. You know, being born a man or a woman is a chance. But being a man or a woman is a choice. And so many young people today don't make those right choices. Lou Holtz, the great coach of Notre Dame, put it best. He said, there's never a wrong time to do the right thing, or never the right time to do the wrong thing. And I really believe that. I mean, to get where you want to go is a real decision on choices that you make every day. I think that our successes motivate us, but our failures educated us. So I think it's very important not to be afraid to lose. I always tell my guys, don't be afraid of how many pails of milk you spill, just don't lose the cow. And we go through and we try to play it close to the vest. I think that that's a mistake. I think you have to push it out there. Now the racehorse business is really a game where you have to be not afraid to lose. But I think that there's a way to handle it, and that's your attitude. It is the most important decision you make every day. Make it early and make the right decision. There's always going to be somebody that tells you you can't do something. I remember back in 1978, I was watching the Kentucky Derby in a hotel room in Bay Meadows, California with some buddies of mine. And we were in the hotel room there, and I was in the quarter horse business then, but I had made the decision to transfer and get into the thoroughbred business. So we're in this hotel room watching the Derby, and there's twin beds, and we're all in there together. We only had one room, wasn't a suite, obviously. And I just casually said, I'm gonna win one of those in 2 years. And everybody looked at me and said, what? And I said, I think I can win one of those in the next 2-3 years. And they'd almost rolled off the bed. They said, oh, you, what the hell? They said, did you hear what he said? Well, that was 1978. In 1980, Codex won the Preakness, and it was the first time I'd ever run in a classic. And my good friend Ed Bowen, I think, was there to watch it. But the thing about your attitude, I've got only one grandson. Jeff's the only boy, and I got one granddaughter. And you know, like all of the grandchildren that you might have, he played Little League ball. And so he always said, Granddad, come and watch me play. He said, we're playing tonight. Well, the games were always at 4 o'clock. And of course, we're doing our chores, we're running horses. So I said, well, I'll get to you, I'll see you. He said, oh, please come and watch me play. So one time he said, we're playing in the championship. He said, can you come? I said, I promise you I'll be there. Well, I got to hustling around the barn and going as quick as I could. Looked up and thought, damn, I'm gonna be late. So I hustled and found the ballpark and came back in the back of the dugout there where the screen was, and I hollered at him. I said, Brady, I'm here. So he comes over and he says, oh, great. And I looked up and I said, Brady, is that the score 6-0 already? He said, Grandpa, don't worry about that. We haven't batted yet. Now, that's a true story. That young man is now 29 years old. He went to the Air Force Academy and played football there, and he is now, and you might really be surprised at this, he is mission coordinator for Air Force One. He dictates everywhere that that plane goes, and he's very much involved with that. People ask me, what is the greatest race I ever won, or what is the best feeling I ever had? Let me say this, when I won the first Kentucky Derby, I thought it was me. I mean, I was all puffed up. I thought, damn, we arrived, we got one. We finally, you want that on your resume if you're a horse trainer, we finally won it. But after the second, the third, and the fourth one, and I was talking to Bill about this, you realize that you have been there, and the most important thing is you've done it for somebody else. To walk out on that infield with Bill Young, or Bob Lewis, or Gene Klein was unbelievable. You stop and you say, gosh, I finally got him there. I've never been really emotional after a big race, but when I met Bill Young on the turf course before we could get to the winner's circle, that is probably the most emotional I've ever been. So when you win it after a couple of times, you think, you know, you've created a situation for somebody else. I think you have to make a difference. And once you get there, you have a certain obligation to maybe reach out and change things. So people ask me, what is the best feeling I ever had after a big race or anything? And I'm gonna surprise you. 30 years ago, 35 years ago, I started taking a young kid, girl or boy, to the winner's circle. I just go through the crowd, or Lori does, and I said, there's one over there, 8, 9 years old, there's a 6-year-old over here, grab them. We just go to the parents, would surprise them and say, come on, we're gonna get our picture taken with this horse. And they're shocked, and I tell the parents, don't worry, we're gonna bring them back. We take them over there, and you would not believe the effect it has on these young kids and what they have to say. But the real satisfaction of making a difference is 30 years later, I found some 25, Lori and I were standing at the Derby this year, and a young guy walked up to me and said, do you remember me? And I said, no. I said, I don't, should I? And he said, when I was 9 years old, you pulled me out of the crowd and took me to the winner's circle. He said, I am now a graduate practicing lawyer. And he said, I still have that picture on the wall in my office. And I said, well, that's wonderful. He said, do you remember what you told me? And I said, no, I don't. He said, you put your arm around me and said, don't bet on the horses, buy books. So when all the fanfare is over and they're patting you on the back and the music dies and you go take the toast with the governor and you go to the press conference and all the accolades are thrown out and everything, I think that the most important thing is when you go to your room that night in the quiet and you put the championship ring on the dresser, you know the trophies that it's placed on the manual, and you ask yourself quietly, did I make a difference? That to me is the most important thing. Through winning this, did I make a difference somewhere in somebody's life? So I'm going to close with that because I know you want lunch, but I will leave you with one more thought. Live every day like it's your last, and one day you'll be right.